The call came at 6:47 inches the morning. I was already awake. At 63, sleep becomes a negotiation. You take what it gives you and you don't complain. I was standing at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the neighbor's sprinkler sweep lazy arcs across the lawn, when my phone buzzed against the counter. My daughter's name lit up the screen. She never called before 8. Not once in 31 years. I picked up before the second buzz. Mom. Her voice was flat, in the way voices get when someone has been crying so long they've run out of the sharp edges. Just flat, hollow, like a room with all the furniture removed. I'm here, I said. I don't know what to do. I set my coffee down. Where are you right now? A pause. I heard wind. Outdoor sounds. A child's voice somewhere close, small, and confused. The park on Kellerman, the one near the elementary school. Are the kids with you? Just Emma. Daniel's at school. Mom, Stay there, I said. Don't move. I'm coming. I didn't ask what happened. I already had a picture forming, and I needed to see her face before I let myself confirm it. I found them on a bench near the fountain. My daughter sat with her back rigid the way she holds herself when she's trying not to fall apart in public. Emma was beside her, 6 years old, picking at a loose thread on her jacket sleeve with the focused concentration children use when they sense the adults around them are close to breaking. 2 suitcases stood upright in the grass. A tote bag. A box sealed with packing tape. I sat down on my daughter's other side and put my arm around her. Emma looked up at me. Grandma, when are we going home? Soon, sweetheart, I said. We're going to my house first. You like my house, don't you? She considered this seriously. You have the good cereal. I do have the good cereal. My daughter made a sound that was half laugh, half something else entirely. I waited until Emma had wandered a few steps to watch the ducks at the edge of the fountain. Then I looked at my daughter. She had a bruise along her jaw that she'd tried to cover with makeup. Not fresh 2 days old, maybe 3. Yellow at the edges. She'd been holding this for at least 3 days before she called me. That landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. Tell me, I said. She told me. Her father-in-law, a man I had tolerated at holidays and birthday dinners for 11 years, a man who had never once looked at me directly when he spoke, who addressed questions about my daughter's life to her husband as though she weren't sitting right there, had decided that my daughter was, in his words, not built for this family. He had said this to her husband. Her husband had agreed. On Tuesday morning, while my grandson was at school, her husband had come home with his father. They told her she had 2 hours. 2 hours to take what she could carry and leave the house that she had lived in for 9 years. The house she had painted and planted and made into something worth coming home to. The house her children had grown up in. Her father-in-law had stood in the doorway of the kitchen while she packed. He didn't help. He watched. When she reached for the framed photo on the mantel, Emma, at 2 years old, gap-toothed grin, birthday cake frosting on her nose, he told her she could leave that. She took it anyway. She had tried to call me from the car. Her husband had taken her phone. He gave it back 3 hours later, after they dropped her and Emma at the park with the suitcases. By then, her hands were shaking too badly to dial. She sat in that park for half a day before she called me. Why didn't you call me right away? I asked. My voice was steady. I had made a decision somewhere between the kitchen window and this bench that I would not let her see what was moving around inside me right now. She looked at her hands. I didn't want you to see it. See what? That I let it get this far. I took her hand. You called me. That's what matters. I meant it, but I also filed the rest of it away the half a day on a bench. The bruise she'd tried to hide. The photo they told her to leave. I filed all of it carefully, in the part of my mind where I keep things I intend to come back to. We put the suitcases in my trunk and I drove them to my house. Here is something my daughter didn't know. Something almost no one knew, because I had spent 11 years making sure of it. My name is Margaret Elaine Voss. I am 63 years old. I was a CPA for 22 years before I quietly moved my practice into investment management, and I am moderately good at it. I say moderately because I was raised to be careful about what I claim out loud. The truth is I am very good at it. I had been watching my son-in-law's family for longer than my daughter realized. Not because I was suspicious, not at first. At first I watched because that is simply what I do. I am a woman who looks at numbers and finds the story inside them. I am a woman who notices when a column doesn't add up, when a pattern shifts, when something presented as stable is quietly leaking from the bottom. My son-in-law's family ran a regional logistics company. 11 years ago, when my daughter told me she was serious about this man, I did what any mother with my background would do. I looked at the company. Not intrusively, I read what was public. I listened to what was said at dinners. I watched how the father-in-law talked about money, not what he said, but how he said it. The small pride that turns into something harder when it's covering something else. 3 years into the marriage, I noticed the first irregularity. It wasn't dramatic. A small vendor contract mentioned at Thanksgiving that didn't match a public filing I'd seen. The kind of thing most people wouldn't catch. I caught it. I didn't say anything. I kept watching. Over the next 8 years, I built a very quiet, very thorough picture. By the time my daughter called me from that park, I had been ready for 14 months. I settled them into the guest room that afternoon. Emma ate 2 bowls of cereal and fell asleep on the couch with the television murmuring. My daughter sat at my kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug and stared at the middle distance. He said, "I'm not getting anything," she said. "His father has a lawyer. He said they'll tie it up for years. He said I should take whatever they offer and sign the papers and be grateful." I refilled her mug. "What about the company?" I asked. "The shares." She looked up. "What shares?" I sat down across from her. 8 years ago, my son-in-law's company had needed a quiet injection of capital. A bad contract, a warehouse fire, an insurance dispute that dragged on too long. His father had come to my son-in-law, and my son-in-law had come to my daughter, and my daughter had come to me. She'd been embarrassed asking. I had told her not to be. I gave them the money. A loan, structured properly, with paperwork, the way you do things when you want them to mean something later. But I had also, as part of the arrangement buried in the documents, reviewed by my own attorney, signed by the father-in-law himself on a Tuesday morning when he was in a hurry and did not read carefully, I had retained a small equity position. 7%. Enough to matter, enough to have standing. My daughter stared at me. "You own part of the company," she said. 7%. Which I have never exercised and which they appear to have forgotten about. I folded my hands on the table. People forget things they signed when they were in a hurry. She was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," she said, "what are you going to do?" I thought about the bruise under her makeup, the photo they told her she couldn't take, the half a day on a park bench before she let herself call me. "I'm going to make some phone calls," I said. The first call was to my attorney, Carol, who had been with me for 19 years and who does not rattle easily. I laid out the equity position. I laid out what I had documented over 8 years, the vendor irregularities, the shell payments, the quiet redirection of funds that showed up when you knew how to look. I had kept records the way I keep everything, methodically, with dates, with copies stored in 3 separate locations. Carol was quiet for a moment after I finished. "How long have you had all of this?" she asked. 14 months fully documented, pieces of it for 8 years. Another pause. "Margaret," she said, "why didn't you bring this to me sooner?" "Because my daughter was still in that house," I said, "and I was hoping I wouldn't need to use it." Carol understood. She is a practical woman. We moved quickly after that. The equity position gave me standing to request a formal audit. The audit request, filed properly, triggered obligations under the company's own operating agreement obligations. The father-in-law had apparently never expected anyone to invoke because he had written them into the documents himself 15 years ago when he still believed that fine print was something you put in to protect yourself rather than something that could be used against you. The audit request went out on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, my son-in-law's family attorney had called Carol 3 times. I let Carol handle the calls. I was busy. I had also, over the years, built something of a quiet network. Women I knew from my CPA days, from investment circles, from the kind of professional spaces where women had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, and therefore tended to pay very careful attention to everything around them. One of them worked in commercial real estate. One of them sat on the board of the Regional Business Association. One of them was a retired judge who still had lunch with half the family court bench every 3rd Thursday. I made some calls. I want to be clear about something. I did not call in favors. I shared information, accurate, documented information, with people who were in a position to do something with it. What they chose to do with it was entirely their own decision. The week that followed was, from the outside, very quiet. My daughter took Emma to the park. She called the school to arrange Daniel's pickup. She started sleeping 8 hours for the first time in what she told me later had been years. She didn't ask me what was happening. I think she was afraid to, and I think she also, somewhere underneath the fear, trusted me. Emma helped me water the garden every morning. She was very serious about it, carrying the small red watering can I'd had since my own children were small, making sure every plant got exactly the same amount of attention. On the 9th day, the audit results came in. What the auditors found was not subtle. Over 7 years, approximately $340,000 had been redirected through a set of vendor relationships that did not, on close inspection, represent real vendors. The money had moved in small enough increments, distributed across enough line items that a casual review would never catch it. But my records, cross-referenced with the audit findings, showed the pattern clearly. The father-in-law had been stealing from his own company. Not just the company, from his son's ownership stake, from the business my daughter had helped keep alive 8 years ago with money she'd been embarrassed to ask for. Carol called me when she had the full picture. "They want to settle," she said. "I know they do. The number they're proposing is not the number we're going to accept," I said. "Let me tell you what the number is." The settlement covered my daughter's share of the marital assets at full value, no delays, no disputes. It covered the children's educational accounts. It covered the equity in the house that her husband had been trying to argue didn't exist. It included a structured payment arrangement on the loan that had never technically been repaid. The father-in-law's attorney pushed back twice. Carol held firm both times. On the third conversation, they accepted. There were also, separately, some conversations with the business association and with certain licensing authorities about the vendor irregularities. I did not control what happened in those conversations. I simply made sure the right information was in the right hands. I am told the father-in-law is now dealing with a formal investigation. I am told my son-in-law has retained his own attorney and is no longer speaking to his father. I am told the house has been listed. I don't follow it closely. That is not my concern anymore. My concern is the woman sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, laughing at something her daughter just said, looking like herself again for the first time in what I now understand was a very long time. My concern is Emma, who has claimed the corner of my garden as her own personal plot and is growing, with great seriousness, 3 tomato plants and a sunflower that is already taller than she is. My concern is my grandson, who came to me 2 weeks after everything settled and sat very quietly in the kitchen for a while before he said, "Grandma, did you know the whole time?" I thought about that for a moment. "I knew enough," I said. "I was waiting until you were all safe before I used it." He thought about that. He is 14 and already asks the right questions. "Why didn't you tell Mom?" "Because," I said, "your mother needed to make her own choices. My job was to make sure that when she was ready, there was somewhere solid to land." He nodded slowly. "He is going to be all right. They all are. I am often asked by women my age what the secret is. How do you protect your family? How do you stay calm when everything is falling apart? How do you know what to do? I don't have a secret. I have a practice. I pay attention. I keep records. I don't announce what I know. I don't spend my energy on anger when I can spend it on preparation. I have learned in 63 years that the loudest person in a room very rarely controls it, and that the person everyone has stopped paying attention to often does. My son-in-law's father looked at me for 11 years and saw a woman who showed up for holidays and brought a good pie and didn't say much. He made a number of assumptions based on that. He was wrong about all of them. My daughter asked me once, a few weeks after everything settled, whether I was angry. Whether I had been angry all those years while I was watching and waiting and building the file that eventually dismantled everything he'd tried to take from her. I sat with that question for a while. "Not angry," I said finally, "patient." She looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was small, and I'd said something she didn't quite understand but felt the weight of. "Is there a difference?" she asked. "Anger burns through," I said. patience builds something. Outside, Emma was in the garden, talking to her sunflower in the serious, instructive tone she uses with things she has decided are her responsibility. The light was doing that late afternoon thing it does in October, going gold and sideways through the trees. I watched her for a moment. Then I went inside to start dinner, because my family was coming home, and they were safe, and that was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. The people who underestimate quiet women are always surprised at the end. I have never understood why. We have been telling them, in every way except loudly, exactly who we are all along. They just weren't paying attention.